Well, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Yeah, it's nice to see everybody. We expect a couple more committee members, so I'm going to give it just a moment longer, if I may. But welcome. Excellent.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Gary.
Hi,
Yeah,
Gary.
okay, you can hear me. Good.
I believe, in light of the time and in recognition of the fact that we officially have a quorum, I would love to, and I know we have a lot we want to attend to. I'd like to suggest that we get started. In that spirit, I wanted to, this is Terry Lee, and I wanted to wish everyone a happy new year and a welcome to the first open space committee meeting of the year. And to call this meeting open and to acknowledge that we have Nona, Tician, Gary, and Betsy in attendance, and we may have our other community member joining shortly. And I also want to acknowledge Craig Taylor, who remains with us, but in a new role as our council liaison. So welcome, Craig. And I also want to acknowledge Betsy is our newly appointed committee member. So Betsy, welcome as well, and thank you. Yeah, sure, thank you. And before I open for oral communications for things that haven't been agendized, I also want to recognize that this is it's a new year, and we have lots of things to attend to, but I also want to acknowledge, since our last meeting in November, the weather has been crazy for all of us, including here in Portola Valley. And I feel safe in saying that on behalf of all of us that are Public Works Department and all of our colleagues in Portola Valley have worked extremely hard to keep our community as safe and functional as possible. And I know we all appreciate their efforts, not just in open space, but on our trails and on our roads and whatnot. And we have much to be thankful for, even as we continue to navigate all of that. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. With that, I'd be happy to open it to oral communications for anyone on the committee or from the community to comment briefly on anything that we didn't get agendized for this time. So I'll be quiet for a second and see if there's anyone who wanted to make a remark. No? Okay. Well, I see Christy has raised her hand. Christy, did you have an open communications comment you'd like to make? If you do, please feel free to.
Yes, thank you. The agenda was quite brief, so I'm wondering if you are talking about Dorothy Ford Park. It was not mentioned here. And if not, then I will say my comment.
Please do. It's not agendized, but I'm sure we'll come back to it at some point. But please, if you have something to comment on, we'll make a note of it.
Wow. So I'm really surprised with all the planning for the housing element that we are not talking about Dorothy Ford Park in the open space committee. So I believe that our parcel taxes paid for this open space, and we donated at many events over 10 years towards open space. So I'd like to know that, did our money go towards the purchase of this land And I'm noticing at the rivers that are so big during this storm and how we were all affected by that. Our open space water flowed into our trails and ruined some of our trails. I drove around looking at bridges. The bridges, the water was almost touching the bridges. I smelled sewage in the rivers. We need to take care of our land and our open space. And I'm especially interested in preserving the 2 trees at Dorothy Ford Park. And I'd like to see what they call a sunrise committee worked on to find an alternative site. So maybe that should be brought up in discussion, but I am actually just amazed this is not on your agenda. And I encourage you to put out another letter as to how you feel about this open space and protecting Ford Field at the site it currently is. And that would be recreation, but I think open space and recreation committee need to work together, because if Ford Field gets smaller, it is no longer a little league field for San Mateo County children, 600 plus a year. And that's what I want to say.
Great, thank you, Christy. Noted. Any other open communications? Okay, let's dive into the agenda.
Excuse me.
Sure,
yeah, Carrie,
Yeah.
I could respond to Christy about 2 or 3 meetings ago. Our committee did issue a statement to the town council opposing the use of the Dorothy Ford Park for housing.
So we have a new council. Can we submit that again? That's what I'd recommend.
Let's thank you both. But in the spirit of my understanding of the protocol with respect to oral communications, because we haven't agendized this, and we can for a next meeting, I think we have to be mindful of engaging in a back and forth conversation.
Oh, you're right. I didn't intend to do that. It was for information purposes only.
I understand. Thank you, Gary. I just wanted to acknowledge my moving on from it was not meant to be disrespectful of the sincerity of Christy's comment. And thank you, Gary, for reminding us all of a little bit of the history. So moving on to what has been agendized, the minutes are in our packet. They're from the November 15th meeting. And I want to acknowledge, as usual, Nona for her efforts to get those drafted quickly, and see if anyone had any comments about those minutes, so that we could update them if appropriate, and then approve them if that's appropriate. Betsy, you raised your hand.
Thank you. I did. I have a very small typo, meant in the spirit of opportunity. It is item B. Let's see, new business, item B, open space parcel review. The 4th line says the committee should be playing. And I thought that was a wonderful idea. But I think that it was intended to be paying attention. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Any other comments from the committee or community? If not, I would happily entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended. Titian? Titian moves. Anyone second?
A second here.
Gary seconds. Okay, all those on the committee in favor, please raise your hand. Any abstentions? No. Okay, excellent. Unanimously approved. Thank you, Titian and Gary, and thank you, Nona, for drafting. Let's move on to old business. The first item under old business is the open space brochure mailing. And before we dive in, let me just acknowledge that what we're all aware of, there was a ton of work put into that leading up to and at the November meeting. And for those of you who weren't aware or don't remember, I think we just looked at it in the minutes, this committee unanimously approved moving forward to get it published and out. However, right before we did that, at the end of the calendar year, we decided it was super important to double check with the council, the mayor and the council, to make sure that they felt the timing was right. And for a number of reasons, in part due to the transition in the mayor's position and the evolution of the council, that review approval got delayed. But my understanding is that consultation has happened. We do have the support of the mayor/council to get this issued now, and I think we're prepared to do that, to follow through on what the committee recommended in November. And I'm going to pause for a second because Nona and Craig, let me recognize, were instrumental in helping get that brochure polished, and also in following up with the mayor and council. And I wanted to make sure that what I just stated feels like an accurate representation of what happened and where we stand today, and that we might now be in a position to get that mailer out to the community as we had originally planned. Craig?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I talked with the mayor and he's said, yeah, go ahead. Let's get it out to the public. I think it'd be great. I think people, reminding people of the value of our open space is fantastic. So, and known as over like 2 years now, and it's taken us a while, but put a huge amount of effort into making really, a beautiful little, flyer. So no, I'm pleased to be the small part at the end here of just trying to push it, out and send it on its way. And then I think you lined up with a publisher. So we're kind of ready to go, other than we're just waiting to get final approval, right?
Yes, I think that's true. And I believe also that not only do we have a publisher who's familiar with and helped us with the layout, they are familiar with mailings for Portola Valley. And I believe we have, and we should reaffirm the budget, that it is within the budget that we have set aside for this very purpose. But I'll pause for a second because Nona may be even more current than I on that status.
That sounds great. I actually don't have a quote from the publisher right now, but I did tell him, I guess it was 2 months ago, that we would be coming back, we hoped, to do this. I was actually wondering if I could try sharing my screen for a minute. I don't know if this will work. Do I have permission to share?
Yeah, let me make sure you do.
Yeah, it looks like I do.
Good.
Let me see if this will show up. Does everybody see my screen, the brochure?
Beautiful.
Okay. So this is actually, this is live. This is in InDesign. And what I wanted to do is just make sure we are all on board with it as it is now, because after our last meeting, Craig and I took a look at it and thought that it needed to sort of encourage people to actually go out and visit the open spaces. And so we added a line, a legacy to enjoy and sustain today. And I guess I want to make sure that, given that this is not verbatim what was approved months and months ago or years and years ago, I'm not sure which, just make sure we really all agree on the wording that should go out. So we can take out this second line, or we can leave it in.
Well, I'll chime in and just say, I like the encouragement and reminder to enjoy and sustain. And I like the exclamation mark, which gives it to me an active, encouraging feel, frankly. So I appreciate what you and Greg we're trying to communicate.
I'll chime in, Terry. I wholly agree.
Same here.
Okay, well, with Gary chiming in, let me also point out that this brochure is really adapted from one that Gary did many years ago. So Gary gets a lot of credit on this.
Thank you, Gary and Nona. Can I just make a little bit of a thought experiment before we sign off on it? This is maybe just because I am an English person. Maybe a legacy to sustain and enjoy today, because a legacy to enjoy and sustain today puts the sustain and the today together, and it feels like the impetus is on sustaining it rather than enjoying it. So I would say a legacy to sustain and enjoy today, exclamation point, says we got to protect it and we got to enjoy it.
Fantastic. Should we capitalize the A? How do we feel about that?
I like the informality of the lowercase a, although the English teacher would say it has to be capitalized. I'm going to go with lowercase.
Okay.
That's good to me.
So stay with lowercase?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Christine, are you a school teacher, by the way?
Kind of, yeah.
Thought so. Sounds like something my wife would come up with.
Is your wife a school teacher?
Yeah.
It's hard to lay low. You know, we expose ourselves so quickly.
Right.
Not that it's
I guess
we should expose ourselves.
Well,
I should
Cummings would be
chime
happy.
in though too that we do want them to sustain it today.
We do.
that we're hoping people will contribute.
Yes,
make
I see why you
donations.
did it. I do.
Okay. All right. I will stop sharing if we're good on this then. So it is just as a reminder, this is what the rest of it looks like. So this is the part that we're working on. And then the map is the flip side. So this side has the mailer stuff on it. And that way the map gets to keep the full page rather than getting kind of shrunk down. Okay, I will stop sharing if that's it.
Did you want to flash the map again, just for those who don't know what it look like?
Let's see,
Or is
it's
that on
not
the
in
system?
this, it's not in this program right now, but
Then don't
I can bring it up in a minute, maybe. I don't want to hold things up. So
Oh no, don't worry about it. It's this, that is unchanged. As I
yeah,
remember.
that is unchanged.
Okay.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
So
Thanks.
as sort of next steps, Terry, can I suggest maybe you check in with Jeremy on the process for basic, because I think they'll probably want a PO submitted. And then Nona, if you could get back to the printer and say, you know, we're ready, can you give us a quote? Then we can pretty quickly close the whole thing out.
Thank you, Craig. Will do.
Okay, so for process, I'll get a quote, give it to Terry. Terry will go to Jeremy for the PO.
Yeah, I think you can kind of do it in parallel. I think you just need to find out. I mean, I don't know if Jeremy wants to see it, if it just goes straight to finance because it's, you know, already in our budget, but he, you know, he would know the right process for it.
All right.
I'll reach out to him. No worries.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting. It's just, you can get it without having to quote, you can at least understand the process. And then as soon as you have it, you can sort of drop it into whatever's appropriate.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks all. We might get to that finish line soon. Moving on, if I may, to item 4B, open space signage. It's back on here only because we raised it at the last meeting about the possibility, in the same spirit of the brochure, of perhaps forming a subcommittee to dig into the idea of whether or not there's any form of signage in any form, be it physical, digital, or otherwise, that might help remind our community of where we have open space, that it's open space, that it's been supported perhaps by the Open Space Fund, and in the spirit of comments that have been made even tonight, but over time, that the more aware we are of the open space we have, and that it's been gifted and maintained, that we might value it and protect it more actively. So I wanted to just raise it again to make sure if there was interest in pursuing perhaps a subcommittee to explore the possibility of this, that we would consider that. So I'm going to pause for a second to see if there are any comments from actually the community first, I think is the protocol, and then we'll turn to our colleagues. Any comments from the community? Christy?
Yeah, I'm interested in signage, and I thought the Neely sign was a nice wood sign that she just put up, and people are starting to notice it. So I'm not sure, we probably have a couple years, and there's 2 plaques at Dorothy Ford Park, and I'd like to see people knowing about it and all the other parks in the area. We will have Hawthorns going in soon, 2024-25, and that will have signage. I know people feel differently about this, but as a newcomer to the community, this would be the first thing I would do if I got this in my mailbox. I would go out and see all of our parks and try to hike every trail. And that's what I did when I moved here. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy. Other comments from the community? May I inquire of the committee if they have any comments?
Yeah, Terry, were you thinking about signage at each location, each open space? Some kind of an introductory sign or something like that? Or?
Yeah, I have no desire to be prescriptive about how pervasive or not, how noticeable or not, the style or anything of that sort. I was merely acknowledging that and this is a personal note, but I feel like I'm on the trails a lot, and I feel like the trails have a different use. I want to acknowledge that, but most of our trails have pretty subtle signage that helps us navigate and enjoy and acknowledge that they're there. And I think that has value. I know the Trails Committee is in the process of updating their map as well. And I think that's important. I also can't hesitate. I wouldn't hesitate to note that in this last round where we were looking at potential affordable housing sites, I felt like some of the sites that we were talking about, they weren't open space, but they were signed in recognition of the horse stables or the town center or the whatever, that I feel like helped remind us that there was a community or importance associated with those parcels. And I feel like even though at Ford Field, there are some plaques, they're pretty subtle, which is probably a nice thing. But I'm not sure everyone realized that those were parcels that had been purchased for a purpose that many of us thought was exclusive, but apparently might not be. And I've just personally wondered if we were all more aware of which parcels were designated open space, if we might care to protect them, more vigorously. So that was the spirit. I wasn't trying to reach conclusions about if that was really the case and what kind of signage would be appropriate, but just acknowledging that it might be something worth maybe investigating a little bit.
Are we?
Betsy?
I didn't mean to intrude if we are, so we've moved to the committee discussion.
Yeah.
I first of all, the spirit of the intention, I'm very behind. And I look so forward to this rising to a higher priority. I mean, right now, as I look at our priorities and some of the pressing needs of this committee in response to the town and the coming couple of years, I'm particularly thinking of the sunrise clause and the housing element. As this rises to the top, I think it will be a signal that we have done the very pressing work in front of us. I'm wholly supportive of it. I would be interested in talking about it more. And again, the intention, which is to engage the community, to allow the community to belong to the open space and the open space to belong to the community, is noble and important. And it follows on the heels of the mailer that's going out. One idea that I had about the mailer is, what if we as a committee were to partner with fellow members of the Conservation Committee and hold twice a year, meet your open space, and we select different open spaces to introduce the community more fully at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. But there are various ways that we can engage more actively and see, check the pulse of the interest. So I think that this, both of these fit together. I just wonder whether we have the capacity to take it on now. And I guess that remains to be seen.
Thank you, Betsy. Appreciate those comments. Any other comments from the committee?
I'll speak up.
Sure.
I actually love the plaques at Ford Field and also at Shady Trail. I think that people learn something when they see a few sentences about how special a place is, or why it was protected, or why it's named the way it's named. And it doesn't have to be long, but it sort of designates it as a special place. And so I support it. I don't know if there is a subcommittee that would have the bandwidth to pursue this in parallel with our other priorities that emphasize the same principles, but I'm in support.
Thank you, Nona. Titian, did you raise your hand too?
I think I'm unmuted, yeah. As I listened to Betsy and Nona, it occurred to me that this is connected to our conversation about our charter and reconfirming what we're up to as a committee. And so maybe a subcommittee that isn't just thinking about signage, but a subcommittee that's thinking more along the terms that Betsy has defined of how do we as a committee serve this purpose of inviting the town to connect with the space. I think I'm maybe more persuaded that a subcommittee like that is something that would be a nearer term priority than just picking the signs right now, which feels maybe less of an intense need. I don't know whether the consensus is, yes, we want to do this, but we want to wait a beat, or whether we want to, I can't quite tell from the Zoom screen what the level of urgency is, but like Nona, I want to say, I think this is a good idea.
Thank you. And I just want to acknowledge what I also feel like I heard from you is whether or not there's an opportunity to broaden the scope of the purpose from signage to connection or something, to give that aspiration even more flexibility in terms of finding solutions, and at the same time acknowledging Betsy's allusion to potentially other priorities that might be more important for us to focus on, at least in the immediate term. No judgment implied by any of that, but that was just a little bit what I heard.
Yes, I think that's what I was trying to say, and also to validate the idea that following on Nona's amazing work on the brochure, there might be some momentum to capitalize on there.
Good point. Good point. I also want to acknowledge that I was raising it not because I necessarily felt a sense of urgency to prioritize it above other things, but just as a build on a prior kind of line of discussion. I don't want to take away from the comment that if we can agree on the charter update, that in and of itself might give some more clarity to areas of focus and priority for us. And so, you know, I want to acknowledge that we need to get to that as well. And that is perhaps one of the most important things we need to attend to tonight. So I'm happy to not push this further than the conversation we've just had, which seems supportive of leaving the concept on the table, even if we shape the concept differently before we turn it into something, you know, more actionable. I also want to acknowledge that that we have the latitude to be a little bit flexible, and Christy raised her hand again. I'm happy to go back to her if she has a brief comment before we move on from this topic. Christy?
Yes, I guess if we look at signage in our town, I think the biggest sign I see right now is from a developer. Mm-hmm. And, you know, at the corner of right next to Roberts. So as we go forward, do we want developer signs, huge ones, or do we want small nature, you know, here's our open space sign? So I think for me, that didn't feel right. And I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you, Christy. Craig, you are off mute. Did you want to say something?
I was just going to suggest, you know, one thing you might do to sort of start this process is just do an inventory. Just understand what kind of signs are in the town. Right, not necessarily just open space signs, but what kind of signs are in the town, so that you have something to sort of play this discussion off once you get to it.
Sure. I think Christy is recommending that we could inventory the developer signs too and point out that we don't want those to be the character of our town more so than some of the other things we value. But duly noted. That's actually a very constructive suggestion. Thank you, Craig. I don't know that we need to come to any greater conclusion than the, I think, helpful conversation we just had now, which suggests to me that we can leave this on the table, but not recommend an action. I certainly don't feel like I'm hearing one. What I'd like to suggest, and now I suspect I might have an idea of how people feel about 4C, the committee website, is maybe to just touch upon that briefly to see, number one, is a check-in to see if we had any work or updates since our last meeting, and acknowledge as well that if we attend to, for example, a charter update, that would certainly be something that we would want to have updated on our website. So, but let me pause for a second, because I think Tician and Craig or someone, a group on our committee was looking at the committee website, and I just didn't want to miss the opportunity to see if there was any updating that was recommended or had been proposed or worked on since the last time we met.
So to my great embarrassment, I'm going to say that for the third meeting in a row, what I have to offer is I said I would work on this, and I have not done as much as would be worth reporting to the committee. At the November meeting, I feel like I got some more clarity from the group about how the interface with conservation would work, and what we might do with what conservation has already started, and what the thing we would produce that would be related but different would look like. But I'll confess I haven't given it any energy since November. So I would respectfully request a bump to the next meeting, but it is something that I have committed to doing, and I will work on.
Okay, great. Gary, did you have a comment? Thank you.
I just wanted to say that Tician came up with some good ideas for the website, as I recall. And one of them was seasonal messages that would advertise what to see in which open space. your flowers and so on. And other good ideas. I think there's a lot there that would do many of the things we were talking about when on the open space signage ideas. So I would say the website comes first anyway. And so if you need some help, up to Terry to appoint someone else, or do you want to do it by yourself? Is your choice.
Maybe since Craig has a new role, Gary, you can help me. Is that what you're thinking, Terry?
No, I thought Gary was volunteering. I don't feel my role is to appoint. My role is to support my colleagues who want to volunteer to help. So Gary, if you're speaking up, was maybe a call to be asked to help, I would certainly support that.
Well, yeah, okay, I can help. I promised my wife to say no to all these kinds of things, and but I'll let it go this time.
I won't tell her.
Okay.
I won't either.
I also didn't hear you say no, Gary. I think you said I was going to help Tishan. I heard no question or no in there.
I feel like we just had an oral agreement, and I see smiling and head nodding. So if that is,
I'll help. It's good.
Excellent, bravo. Thank you so much, Gary, for stepping up and forward to assist Titian and let Craig fully transition to his council advisory role. So that's fantastic. That's progress. Thank you, Titian. And I think if we do our job right later this evening, we'll also give you some additional content to update the committee website with. So thank you all for that.
So for the purpose of the minutes, can I redefine the subcommittee as consisting of Tishan and Gary?
I feel like that was what Gary was willing to do. And
that's what I took away from it, but I'm just checking since it's going to go in the minutes.
It's in the records already.
Thank you, Gary.
All right.
And thank you, Tishan. So. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's transition to new business. The first item, 5A. I just wanted to pause for a second and thank Betsy again, who volunteered at the last meeting, even before she was appointed to the committee, to be part of the charter subcommittee team, working to review the charter, which is in the materials, which I believe was from 2008, Betsy.
I would say you coaxed me out of the woodwork, Terry.
Oh, good. I coaxed.
I don't volunteer to rewrite charters. This is my first.
No, you were politely coaxable, and a pleasure to work with. Really appreciate your careful attention to the document, and what we have in the materials is both the original, or I shouldn't say original, I'll call it the 2008 edition of the charter, unmarked. You have a well-marked, is the best way I think I could describe it, proposal of an update. And for hopefully it's not too intimidating, because there is a version at the end of the materials with the proposed changes accepted, which might be an easier read. And I'm going to pause for a second, because I would invite Betsy, who did the heavy lifting, to give an overview, if she cares to, of the spirit of what we were trying to do, so that we don't necessarily get caught up in every word or punctuation point, unless that's where we end up. But Betsy, could I ask you to just like frame what we were trying to do? You're on mute.
Thank you. Our approach was that we were going to do a light touch pass on the charter. And as Terry and I got into it, we realized that there was a tremendous amount of redundancy, quite a lot of repetition, just straight out repetition, lot of extra pounds of words there. So the English teacher will be very pleased with us for doing what we could to advance it to a somewhat cleaner approach. We stuck very much with the spirit of what was there before, but we are not wed to this. I think one issue that, as I was reviewing past minutes, such as I could find them in 2018 and 2019, there was a drumbeat call from various members of this committee to address the maintenance costs and how we were going to deal with that. And we didn't address it directly. As much, I could read you the minutes if you like. But how we were going to use the open space funds, we left it far more general so that the interpretation, the charter is meant to serve many years. And so we thought to leave it more open-ended. Those are the high points. I think that, Terry, is there anything you'd add?
No, thank you, Bev. I have to say, we both probably felt a little bit bad that there was so much markup, and it was not a reflection of a feeling that the spirit of the charter wasn't on point. It was really just an effort to update it, remove some redundancies, and fashion in a way that we thought would be workable for kind of the current and evolving situation, but still honor the spirit of an open space, not an open space acquisition, but an open space committee. That's an important adjustment, the proposed name change that we discussed at the last committee meeting, to be inclusive of a broad set of topics, to include acquisition, to include maintenance, which is not to suggest that the acquisition fund should be used for maintenance, but just that we had permission as a committee to support the council in matters of maintenance, regardless of where the appropriate source should be. So a bit of a clarification on what Betsy and I were thinking, by being more inclusive of the scope of topics that an open space, as opposed to an open space acquisition committee, could address. And we thought that was responsive to the community's interest in being able to talk about a broader range of issues that might relate to open space conservation, preservation, and enjoyment. From a matter of process, maybe we can start with any questions or comments from the community first before we transition to a committee conversation. Any comments from the community about our effort? Thank you, Betsy, for helping frame our work. Christy?
Yeah, this is quite an undertaking, and thanks for working on it. It all looks good. I really like number 3, develop community awareness of open space opportunities. And it reminded me of what Betsy said about, meet our open space, and we can take people to different open space on different dates and different times and have a leader. And I really see that happening possibly with the Trails Committee. So there's something about that sentence I really like, because the other sentences are public awareness and education, but I really like the sentence of develop community awareness of open space opportunities. So I'm just going to throw that out there, because I saw it crossed out, and that's all.
Thank you, Christy. Other comments from the community, if any? maybe like we could transition to the committee. Does the committee have any feedback on the draft as it stands? Oh, I see a thumbs up, but Tician, you raised your hand. Uh-oh, teachers.
Here comes the school teacher. Thank you, Betsy and Terry, so much for doing this. And I really appreciated, as I reviewed it, the impulse towards simplicity and clarity. And not just as an English person, but also because this committee will evolve over time, and the issues that it faces will evolve. And so the dance is to say something that tells us what to do without, trying to guess what we'll have to do. And so I wanted to appreciate that. There are two places I would love to just kind of check in about the language and the work that the language is doing. The first place is under objectives. We have support, protect, and connect, and then we have a comma and advising. So the school teacher's like, we can't possibly have a gerund after having, but I think the issue is deeper. The relationship between supporting, protecting, and connecting and advising is kind of like hidden in that comma. And what we think the relationship between advising and supporting is kind of hidden in that comma. So as I thought about it, I thought, well, why don't we just say, advise the town council on open space matters, period. Support, protect, and connect the community with the town. I think our raison d'etre is to advise the town council. So I think we say, we advise the town council. And then the description of that objective of advising is to support these things. So I wanted to sort of make that suggestion that we take the second clause that happens after the comma, make it a sentence and begin with it. But it is stronger language, right? Starting by saying our objective is to advise, is to take on that role very explicitly. What do people think about that? I have one more, but maybe we should talk about this first.
May I chime in?
I don't know, Terry, can she?
Yeah, of course.
I'm so grateful. I mean, I wasn't going to beg, but by the time we were crafting this particular piece, I recognized that it was cumbersome and wordy, but fatigue had set in and we were driving to get this in the package. I thought it was a bit of a weak link, and I just couldn't thank the English teacher in you more for coming up with the new wording so quickly. So I like it a lot. What do you think, Terry?
Well, I agree.
All right, so my second moment of intervention is in 5. And it's the last clause, well, maybe the second 2 clauses, and land use ordinances that reflect the values of our community and ecosystem. And boy, do I love that idea, protecting the ecosystem and the value of our community, the values of our community. Ecosystems don't have values, so we have to do something about the order of those things. But more importantly, there is not total consensus about what the values of our community are. And even though I feel like we know just what you meant, Betsy and Terry, by saying that, it's one of these kinds of euphemisms that can create trouble, like the values of our community, everybody can claim that, it doesn't have content. And so I wondered if we could be even more precise about what value we really want to nail down in this charter. And I thought the value we want to nail down in this charter is the value of open space to our community. So I would have that reflect the value of open space to our community as that language. And then we'd have to think about what we're going to do with the ecosystem. I like the ecosystem. I'm good with that. Maybe, so the end of the sentence would read, and land use ordinances that protect our ecosystems and reflect the value of open space to our community. I just feel like that's cleaner and sharper and maybe helps not get us into trouble with what we really mean there.
Could you read it again, please?
Yeah, could you read that one more time?
So at the end of 5,
yeah,
we have language that is, and land use ordinances.
Yeah.
And then from there, I would say that protect our ecosystems,
yeah,
and reflect the value of open space to our community.
Right. It gives us the flexibility to value open space, to define that
As a thing we value
as a community without trying to prescribe what that is today. Yeah, I like that.
So if I could ask, how does that overlap with conservation? Because I think one thing you want to be careful of is you don't end up creating a charter that's ambiguous with other committees' charters. So how would you guys tease that out so that it didn't feel like a conservation issue?
Is it the ecosystem part that feels like a conservation?
Yeah. The open space, that part's fine, and that was great. And I agree, that is the value that we absolutely want to preserve. But yeah, it was the ecosystem stuff I was trying to tease out a little bit more.
Yeah, I think, Craig, you're probably right that we're inviting some trouble by putting ecosystem in there. I don't think it has to be there. But Betsy, if you want to make the case for it having to be there, then I don't know. Nona, are you on conservation also? Like, how would we figure this out? This is this problem I keep seeing, is like, what does conservation do and what do we do?
Nona, can you comment on that?
Well, yeah, I tend to agree that it isn't really our role to protect ecosystems. But maybe one way of getting around that is to take that out, and rather than say reflect the value of open space to our community, we could say reflect the values and make it plural, because open space can mean a lot of different things too, as long as it's a reason to protect them, I guess.
I like that, Nona.
I mean, maybe that protect and reflect the values of open space.
Sure.
I don't know. But anyway, I'll stop there.
If I might say, I can support, I'll go along. I would say, though, that I do not see, when you're in a relationship, if both people are focused on giving exactly 50%, it sometimes works out less well than if both are giving 60%. So the fact that there might be overlap with the Conservation Committee, to me, would not be a problem. I doubt they would call us on being on their turf. However, if the charter is meant to keep us in a lane, it's all right with me to withdraw the word ecosystem.
Yeah, if I could sort of add my perspective as a council member, I wouldn't said so much it's keeping the committee in a lane. It's more, as a council member, if I have an issue, who should I go to talk about it? And if I end up with charters where 2 people are doing the same thing, then it becomes a little more difficult to figure out, where I would sort of start that conversation and ask a committee to move forward on it. So that was a little bit what I had in mind. So give that some
I would
thought.
never worry about you, Craig.
Well, thank you. But that was sort of my concern. We've certainly in the past, and I would ask you guys to think about this as well when you're trying to word this. I mean, we certainly worked on the idea of a wildlife corridor, and we were supportive of that along Alpine Road. So, I wouldn't feel like the Open Space Committee shouldn't ever be able to weigh in on these things. And I don't feel like the charter necessarily prevents you from weighing in. I mean, we certainly have committees that weigh in on things that really aren't in their charter, but they weigh in on them anyway. And I think that part's fine. So I think trying to find that balance is what you want to think about.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd also say that everything we have to say is additive to the conservation effort as well. It doesn't, I don't see it detracting at all. I guess I just wouldn't worry about that kind of wording. But I like what we ended up with so far, some combination between Tissy and Nona's sentence for item 5.
You know, another way of thinking about it is that overlap is good, but a lack of overlap maybe encourages you to reach out to collaborate more with other committees. So if there is a reason to partner more with conservation, that might promote it.
Yep.
Other comments? Tician, thank you for the careful read and zeroing in on a couple of areas where you know, it's worthy of additional consideration. I'll say I personally am fine with improving the wording, and if it's helpful, lightening the reference or removing the reference to ecosystem. I have to say I don't mind us collaborating with each other. I don't think it's just our decision. I feel it's obviously what is helpful to council, and then also the way the community reaches out to us. So again, we're here to support council and to support the community, not to support ourselves. And so if you know, if council has guidance for us and the community wants to interact with us, even if it's it may be a little bit ambiguous as to whether it be in one lane or another, when arguably it could fall in both or either. It doesn't trouble me personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys should, you know, just think through it and decide what you think is reasonable. One thing I would say is Sarah and I have started, we're on a subcommittee right now, council subcommittee, to look at the committee handbook and the committee charters. And so there's a whole process going on. So this is going to dovetail. I don't think there's a big rush to get this done. Like, I think you guys should get comfortable with it, and then we'll continue with this other process, and then we can bring these charters into that process. And I think that should work pretty well.
I thought, Craig, was that not a 6-month process? Maybe I misunderstood when I heard Sarah bring it up originally. I thought she even wasn't going to dive into it as early as now, but a little bit later after the housing element went in.
I think we need to figure out where the right place to sort of start it up full. I mean, what we're trying to do as the subcommittee is sort of propose what the process is, what issues should be looked at, and then sort of get that moving forward. But once that process is in place, then it's still going to take time, because even if we get everybody together and we have these discussions, it's still going to come back to the committees and then bubble back up. So, I mean, we're talking at least 3 months, and it probably doesn't start for a month. So I think you can safely assume it's at least 4 months. And so sure, 6 months doesn't seem unreasonable. I guess what I would say is I don't think that it's critical that you guys amend your charter, because somehow in the next 6 months, people are going to be confused. I mean, I think you guys can operate perfectly well with the existing charter. But I think the work you've done and being thoughtful about it is going to reflect back into this process. And I think it's going to help other committees think about their charters as well.
So
thank you. Can I say, Terry, can I, one thing super quickly, and then you can tell me whether there's time for the other comment. Just quickly to thank Tician, as you did, for her very careful read. And then I think, since there's question about the word ecosystem, Nona came up with a lovely compromise solution that protects and reflects the values of open space, if I got that in the right order, protects and reflect
Mhm.
the values of open space. I'm very comfortable with that. That removes the area of question that is out there, and that would allow us to flow through. And then if I could make a separate point to address
Please.
something that Craig has brought up.
Please.
Craig, as I understand it, this would go through the probably appear on the consent calendar, along with the name change proposal, along with our previously stated interest in meeting every other month on a regular basis, so that scheduling the committee meetings was not so arduous. And so that it wouldn't have to fold in with the committees and policy handbook that you and Sarah were looking at, unless you see some reason that our charter would need to be incorporated in the policy. And
well, so moving your meetings to, you know, every other month on a regular basis sounds great. That sounds like a consent agenda item to me. Changing the charters doesn't feel like a consent agenda item to me. I would hope that the council would discuss it and that you guys would come and present it to the council and say, you know, here's why we've proposed this. Because at the end of the day, the charters are the responsibility of the council. I mean, that's sort of, you know, where that approval process ends. And I don't want to take that casually. I really like the work you guys are doing. I don't object to you putting it on the agenda if you think that's appropriate, but I would pull it off the consent agenda if it were there.
oh,
Because
okay.
I want it to be discussed.
May I ask a couple quick follow-up questions about that would guide us?
Yeah, sure, please.
One is just that by virtue of going to as many meetings as I have, the recent couple of years, these do go through the consent agenda. They haven't ever been pulled off the consent agenda yet, but I'm sure if we got too creative, they would be. And so towards that, would you see anything in the presentation and our discussion today that would give you cause to say, hey, here's an area that I would, for one, want to pull this off the agenda to discuss? As a former member of the committee, you're intimately involved in
sure.
sides.
And the reason I would pull it off is I think the work you guys have done is great. The reason I pull it off is only so many members of the public actually attend an open space committee on Thursday night. And I would like it for people to say that you guys come and present and say, hey, we've made these changes, here's what we're trying to do. And the council would hear that. I wouldn't expect that the council would object. So in that sense, the consent agenda, you know, sort of works, but I want it actually to be a thing. Like, this council is a little different than the old council. And I think one of the things that we're working toward is making sure that the committee system that we've had in place since the beginning of the town is robust. And to me, part of that being robust is that we take these things like charter seriously and we have a discussion. So that's my thinking. Now, again, I'm your liaison. I'm not the council. I'm one council member. So if you guys want to put it on there and that's the way you want to approach it, I mean, that's fine. I'm just trying to, no, I mean, I don't feel like you're pushing back. I'm just trying to explain my thinking and why that's what feels right to me, because I think it's important, not because I think it's controversial.
Tessian, did you have a question or comment?
I have a question, I think for Craig. Or maybe I just don't, it's a procedural question and someone will know the answer. Can we put our proposed revised charter like up on the open space website? Like I really appreciate, Craig, that you're saying like, let's actually talk about it. Let's actually do it. And I'm wondering like, what is the scope of that? Let's really have it be visible.
Well, if you wanted to turn it into, you know, a public discussion, then I think we'd have to think about whether putting it on the website, because I mean, generally we haven't used that as the place to start public discussion, but we might be able to.
I guess I was just, I'm trying to take seriously what you're saying, and so I'm
right.
trying to...
No, I totally appreciate that, and that's why I think finding the right time to bring it to the council seems to me the right place for it, rather than putting it up on a website. Because I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, in the end of the day, you still want to, unless you think you're going to change it, I think you want to get it in front of the council. And then, you know, get any additional comments if there are any from the council. Like I said, I think the job you guys have done is actually quite good. So I would not be objecting to what you've written here, but I would like, I mean, I don't know if anybody went to the council meeting where all the committee chairs just briefly said what the committees did and what they were looking at for the coming year. But it was hugely valuable to me as a commissioner, or as a council member, sorry, to hear that from the committees. So that's sort of what I'm after, is I really want to make sure that we, you know, respect the committees, and that when we do stuff like this, we make it a real thing. But,
can I ask just a follow-up question to that?
Yeah.
Like, I think some of us might be feeling a lot of desire to say, hey, this work got done, we like what we made.
Sure.
And so maybe we can do that today. Maybe we can say, we as a committee like what we made, but then maybe wait a beat before submitting it to the council, and sort of let you as our liaison give us a heads up when it's time. So that would maybe be a compromise between not letting this not have happened, but the committee saying, yes, our committee saying this, we like this, but not necessarily immediately taking it to you. Is that a sort of an interim thing?
yeah, sure, that sounds great. And let me, you know, like in just the next couple of days, let me sort of, you know, I'll talk to Sarah, I'll talk to Jeremy. Let me figure out where we can fit it in. And like I said, I'm hoping to fit it in a more meaningful way rather than just dump it in the consent agenda. So if you guys are okay with that, I mean, again, I'm not trying to block you from moving forward. So if you guys as a committee feel, you know, strongly about it, move along. But certainly your idea of saying tonight, we've approved of this wording, we believe that this is a strong statement of what we think the Open Space Committee does, I think that's great.
Betsy?
Thank you, Terry. I like Titian's idea, and to supplement that, Craig, when you're talking with Sarah and feathering this out, if the charter is to be held for a more robust conversation, could we split the committee name change and the meeting, the every other month, first Thursday meeting that we've settled on, and allow that to sail through?
Yeah, I would recommend that. That makes total sense to me.
I mean, it would be lovely, in fact, if it could all kind of sail.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't think there's an objection from the public for, you know, how often you meet. If anything, I think the public will be happy that you meet more often. And I think the name change is what we've been doing for the last 15 years, 20 years anyway, maybe more like 40 years now that I think about it. But so I think those should go through. And I certainly, if I saw that, I wouldn't pull that off the consent agenda. I would just let those go through from my personal point of view.
I'd like to just make sure I have the wording correct for the two changes that were made. If just in anticipation of maybe a committee decision to approve something. So what I have under objective is advise the town council on open space matters, period. Support, protect, and connect the community with the town's open space and rural environment. Is that correct?
Is spaces plural, or it's open space?
Say that again?
You have open spaces and rural environment. Is it?
I had open space, but what is it? Is that open spaces?
On the revision that was proposed, it's open spaces and rural environment. Is that right, Betsy?
Okay. You're muted, Betsy.
What sounds better? I mean, open space, we usually talk about open space. So if, I'm sorry that I'm having a problem because my screen split. So I've got to keep going back and forth. If you're looking at it, Titian, And Nona, can you make a call?
I like it singular. I like what Nona has.
Yeah, I do too right now.
Okay, so what the second sentence says, just to repeat, support, protect, and connect the community with the town's open space and rural environment. And then the second change is the last clause under 5 that begins with that. And instead of saying that reflect, etc., it says that protect and reflect the values of open space to our community. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Could I ask one clarifying question? Craig, in light of the guidance that you've given us, where it sounds like you're okay with us updating the name and the suggestion for regular meetings, should we leave? And Nona is working, I mean, she was just talking about a different proposal that we'll hold back on because that's changing other language. Just wanted to clarify if we should leave the references to the open space events subcommittee and the 10 members and all that for the subsequent, you know, further reflection and editing, or if that's something that you feel comfortable we can just pass through.
I mean, I think that that's sort of the operating procedures of the committee. I don't see that as important in my mind. I mean, it's important that the committee operate and function well, but this is sort of your constitution, you know, your charter is your sort of constitution, you know, it's a particularly special thing, which is why I think it deserves a special place. So the rest of it, yeah, I think if you want to push the rest of it through, but that stuff's in the charter, right? So that's.
Well, our proposal was to edit it out because we don't have a special open space event subcommittee.
Right.
And we don't contemplate using one for what, you know, going forward, and that we were proposing a construct that gives us more flexibility to create subcommittees as needed, as opposed to a specifically named subcommittee referencing events specifically in the charter. But again, if that's too much to process and the council and the community needs more time to process that kind of a language change, we'll leave it in the charter for another day. I'm just trying to define what is acceptable to ask for approval for sooner rather than later. And I have no opinion because, you know, you have a stronger opinion about this. So,
well, I guess my sense is your world's not going to change tomorrow when the charter changes, right? The charter really is the longer term statement of values. And so, you know, if you've got, you know, an open space subcommittee listed there and the 10 members, for right now, I would leave it. I would just roll it all up when you make the charter change. Just do it at once and say, you know, here's how we want to change the charter. And that way you'll have all those things wrapped up into one thing. Right. So unless you think it's really important to get it done now, I wouldn't worry about that. I would just make your meeting change and your name change and leave it at that.
Okay, but you're giving us permission to do that means the charter would be updated for the name change and for the regular meetings, or are you saying we'll just get the council to approve those two things, but we'll leave the charter inconsistent with the new name and the meeting schedule?
You know, good questions. I don't know. I mean, I guess it wouldn't bother me either way. So why don't you guys, I mean, I would recommend that you propose name change and the time change, and we'll figure out the mechanics. If the mechanics is just to insert those in the old charter for now, just verbatim, and then when you guys write the new one, then the stuff sort of falls out, I think that's okay, or we just leave it and don't worry about it. So I'm not sure what the right answer is.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
but I think that's where we can talk to Jeremy or maybe even Cara if we have to.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments from the committee?
So may I ask a question, which is, are we then prepared to vote to approve the changes that we've read in today and approve this within this committee, and then let's see what Craig reports back to us? Is that where we are, or are we going to postpone the vote because of the input we've had from council liaison?
I would suggest, if as a working group we're feeling or developing comfort with the subcommittee's work, that if we feel comfortable acknowledging that, that at least is a step on the committee's part to reach a consensus proposal that when Craig or the council gives us more guidance about their preparedness for considering it, then at least we're half a step, towards that direction. That's my inclination, especially because we've now been advised that the committee name change and the regular meeting, which we previously put forward at the last meeting, and I think unanimously agreed to put forward, can be proposed separately from the charter. My personal perspective, knowing that we're not proposing the charter rewrite yet to the council, is that we could at least agree, if there's agreement on the committee's part, that it's feeling like an improvement and in the direction that we feel is appropriate. Ticia?
This is like a moment where I would move that we vote as a committee on the proposed language for the new charter, which we will submit to the council when it makes sense to. Because I don't think we need a motion around the name change and the meeting schedule, because we've already done that, right?
Yeah, I think
so I would like to move, Terry, that we have a vote on this proposal to change the charter.
Do you have a second?
I second that.
Gary, thank you. Gary with a second.
By the way, I would add to that, I didn't count the change in the number of words, but I can tell you that we went from, at least on objectives and duties and functions, from 29 lines to 15. Cut it in half. That's a success. Good work.
That was part of our goal, I might add, to be more succinct and reduce the repetition, which Betsy introduced the framing around. So thank you for that comment, Gary. No, before we vote, Nona, did you have a comment or question?
I do. I guess I thought, Terry, you had said our goal tonight was to acknowledge the work of the committee and our general agreement with what has been written.
Yeah.
And I thought Craig was saying that there might be sort of an iterative process with his subcommittee with before we would actually make a motion to approve certain words. Am I wrong on that? Or are we really ready for a motion to approve a new charter?
Well,
that's what the motion was.
Yeah. I'm just asking about the because that's not what you said, Terry. You said you wanted to acknowledge the work of the subcommittee.
No, I understand.
Okay.
I took Craig's advice as don't bring it to the council yet because the community is not ready or the council's not ready. I'm not sure, but if the committee feels like this is a step in the right direction, I'm fine asking if the committee says, yes, we feel like this is a good update for the charter, and I'm happy to sit on it because I think that's what Craig's said to us, and we're not going to recommend it to the council for approval. So we can't adopt this. This is just our updated draft. The council is the only party that can adopt this, to my understanding. So because we're not proposing it to council yet, I don't feel like we're agreeing to propose it to council. We're agreeing that it's a good update. We feel like it's a good update based on what we know, you know, as it stands. But if people feel uncomfortable with that, I'm totally flexible. Betsy, did you raise your hand?
Did. Thank you, Terry.
Yeah.
I think if this is to become an iterative process, the subcommittee would request specific direction as to what we're iterating on. Because as far as I think the subcommittee is concerned, this is our best effort, and we very much appreciate the edits and suggestions that have been incorporated tonight. I don't see the problem if the committee were ready and there was consensus here. If anyone wants to carry it on because they want more time to think about it, please intervene. If not, then I would propose that we go back to the vote, which is on the table, and then allow Craig to sort out when this is presented, whether it's presented with the name change and the meeting date, or whether it's separated in advance to some future calendar. That could be in the council and the town manager's hands.
Thank you, Betsy, because that's, I wanted, as part of the discussion, bring that. What I heard Tishan said was submit it when appropriate. And the thing I wanted to ask you guys to just make sure we're clear is, I'm your liaison, I'm not the council. So if I go back and they say, yeah, put it on the consent agenda at the next meeting, I just want to make sure that you guys are all okay with this motion to say, yep, we're ready. If the rest of the process wants to put through a consent agenda, that'll happen. And so I think that Tishan's motion includes all that, and I'm as well. So as long as everybody's clear on what the motion is, you do have a motion before you.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
And I want to acknowledge, I think, Gary, did you second it?
Seconded it.
Yeah. Is there any other discussion on the committee's part? Nona, thank you.
I guess I just want to make sure that Craig is saying that he doesn't imagine that he and Sarah would want to come back to us and say, well, after we've reviewed all of these committee charters and we're trying to energize communities and get them to work together, that he wouldn't have, you know, some edits to suggest, because I would not like to see us approve a charter one day and then in a couple of months come back and, you know, sort of revise it again. I take it really seriously, that's all.
I didn't think I was proposing that we approve a charter as us. I think I tried to carefully say that this was what we would propose to the council as a change in our charter. Does that create some more space? Right, it's not ours to change without the council saying it's okay to change it, yes?
And no, of course, and I understand that, but by approving it tonight, are we saying that this is what we really think it should be, regardless of what of the subcommittee of the council might say that we don't know about?
So, no, did you have an idea for how we can solidify this work that we've done so we don't all have the sense of this going on forever, and create enough space to address your concern? Because that's very much the spirit, I think, of what we're trying to do. Do you have, I don't think I necessarily had a good idea. Do you have a better idea about how to handle this?
I personally love what you did, and I'm totally comfortable with it. It's just that there's this unknown about what Craig and Sarah are going to sort of think about and how they will conceptualize the way the committees work together or work independently. So what I thought was really great was Terry's suggestion that we acknowledge the great work that the committee had done and the progress on updating the charter language. If you want to make it stronger then I think you said you made a motion to approve the new wording of the charter. If that's the motion, then I'm just trying to clarify where we are on this.
Yeah, I think I wanted to approve the wording of the proposed new charter. Gary, is that what you thought you seconded?
Yeah.
Yeah, so still treating it as proposed.
Yes.
And I'll just add that my comment that we were holding it was an acknowledgement of respect for a process that Craig has advised us may take place in the next 6 plus or minus months. That might slow us from proposing this for actual consideration to the council in that time frame, or if they take longer, in an extended time frame. But it's not meant to be disrespectful of a process that is going to happen sometime in the future, but none of us really know exactly when and how it's going to take shape. I will personally say that it doesn't bother me personally that that we might make additional conforming changes if from a stylistic or even a substantive standpoint, the council were to be able to provide additional guidance, which obviously we would honor and want to respect. I'm just also wondering, I'm also imagining that in this interim period, I've been reminded that our committee does not have a charter on our website, and that people have wondered, what the scope of our responsibilities are. And I don't mind, I guess, not putting our existing charter up there. Or I guess I don't mind putting the old charter up there. So at least there's something that reflects some desire to communicate and be transparent about, what we're doing. Would I prefer for it to be a little updated, especially because I feel the spirit of the subcommittee's effort was not to change the substance of our purpose, but to try and reduce the repetitiveness of it. So, I definitely was not trying to circumnavigate. I shouldn't say I feel the subcommittee was not trying to circumnavigate any appropriate process, nor to change the substance of what we have understood the community and the council have always wanted from the open space committee, but simply to simplify and to clarify. Really, that's what I thought we were trying to accomplish. So if we've overstepped, it certainly was not our intent. So, and we can leave it off of the committee website, and we can do whatever council or council advisee recommends.
But so the thing I would say here, I think we've gotten pretty deep in the weeds, and I totally appreciate you guys taking this seriously. I don't think you guys saying, here's a charter that we are proposing, that we, the committee, are proposing to be our charter. I mean, there's nothing disrespectful about that. And no, I would be okay that, even if, let's just say 6 months from now, we decide that all charters have to have a certain format, right? To me, that's more of a conforming. It doesn't change the sense of it. I doubt it would even really change the wording other than maybe how we format it. So I think if you guys are happy with this as your proposal, then I think the motion that's on the table from Titian is fine. It doesn't feel disrespectful to the council. And my commitment to you guys as your liaison is I'll go find out sort of the appropriate mechanism, both for getting it approved and when the right time to do that is, and also whether it'd be appropriate to put a draft proposed charter up on the website. I mean, if we call it the draft proposed, it's not the one that's been approved. But let me figure out where the sensitivities are. I think that's really what I was after.
Thanks, Craig.
So Terry, thanks, Craig, for that. So we do have a motion and a second. Why don't we vote on it?
Yeah, I have no problem calling for the vote. I was also trying to be respectful to Nona's questions and desire for clarification, and obviously also to Craig for the guidance that he's trying to give us. So I just wasn't trying to make things more awkward than necessary. Nona, I'd like to call for a vote. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds great. And so what I have for the minutes is a motion to approve the new wording of the proposed new charter. Mm-hmm. Is that the motion?
Yeah. And so could I see a show of hands for those in favor of that? That's all the committee members on. So thank you, Nona, for rereading that, Titian and Gary for proposing it and seconding it. And I'll just restate that is a motion that's within our committee, and we will stand with Craig as he helps us figure out what to do with that. But I do want to again acknowledge Betsy's leadership and effort in sticking her neck out there and helping us take something really important and try and recraft it to be more succinct and still in the spirit of moving forward. So thank you, Betsy, again.
And thank you, Terry.
Yeah. And thank you, Craig, for hanging in there with us and helping us navigate this. But it feels like a good step in the right direction, and we'll stand by for additional guidance from you. I want to acknowledge the time and just quickly look at the agenda we have to see what else we might quickly address. Under new items, hold on. There's just a couple of things. I want to acknowledge that we also have the annual budget, and our current budget, I believe, stands at $2,500. And our belief is that will cover the mailing, which has historically been our main out-of-pocket cost. And I just wanted to put it here. We haven't been asked for a new budget for the new year. We have a little bit of time, but I just want to acknowledge that as we think about the other areas of focus that we might have going forward, not just for the remainder of this fiscal year, but going forward, that we keep in the back of our mind that we may want to consider recommending a different budget if some of those other priorities start rising towards the top of our focus list. So I don't think we're asking for any action there. I just want to acknowledge that we've historically had that $2,500 budget, which has been more than satisfactory. I'll pause for a second. Betsy, you're raising your hand.
Yes, I was only going to observe that the committee meeting, the January meeting, when the committees all presented to the town council, most of them did present their budgets for the year. And as we've not yet had the conversation about committee priorities, if we could make if we could advance that thoughtfully to the next March meeting,
Sure.
because after that, the town's going to be considering their budget in May, so we could get it in that way. And I can hold one idea that I have for that to the March meeting, where everyone could vet ideas for how we could spend the town's money.
That's a great suggestion, Betsy. Thank you for pushing that a little bit further. We definitely want to be prepared to dig into that a little bit more, even if we don't necessarily need to dig into it tonight. But thank you, Betsy. It's really to encourage us to be thinking about it and not necessarily just revert to same as last year. So thank you for acknowledging that. Any other comments about annual budget? Knowing that I think we're going to move to discuss it in more earnest, but only in the context of committee priorities, which makes sense when we're ready to have that conversation. Christy, your hand's still up. I don't know if it's from before. I apologize if it was, but if it's about annual budget, please feel free to chime in.
No, it was on the last subject. I just think that you voted on something that's really important, and that's open space. And I'm wondering why we're happy to sit on our mission statement and not put it on the website. I'm having a hard time with that. I mean, open space to me is precious. We need to tell people about this. Is why we moved here. So I really say take it to the council and then do the next step when more changes are made by the new council. But I think as a committee working autonomously and passing things that you should have that autonomy to do what you feel is right. And I encourage you to do so. Thanks.
Right. Thanks, Christy. Let's move on to the last item. I just want to acknowledge under 5C that welcoming Betsy is fantastic, and yet we still have one vacancy on the committee, and I wanted to just invite our community and committee members to understand that and feel free to recommend additional persons who might be willing, able, and apt to serve. We can talk about that tonight, or we can just remind ourselves of that, but I wanted to highlight that is still an opportunity for us. Gary?
Yes, as you know, we have another person who will apply for the committee.
Great.
And she's online.
No.
She hasn't shown her face yet, but she's online. I just wanted to say some things about Bev. I think a lot of people consider her the main caretaker of Shady Trail. And if you've hiked that trail from time to time, you're sure to have run into Bev. They're dragging a big plastic bag of invasives that she's plucked from the trail. I bet we've seen her once every 2-3 months doing the same thing. So it's also, I wanted to tell you that she and her husband were major contributors to the flag lot that exists virtually on top of Shady Trail. And if that had been developed, it would have severely damaged the experience of Shady Trail. So she's got a long history, can tell you everything about Shady Trail. And so I, for one, am encouraging her to move ahead with her application.
Thank you, Gary.
What a wonderful announcement. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Bev, if you're listening.
I'm not sure if she's on at the moment.
Yeah, well, she may be muted.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge your gracious introduction, Gary. And Bev just unmuted.
Oh yeah, I've been listening.
Okay.
Thanks, you guys. I really love open space. I was telling Gary, I kind of have a long history of loving it since I don't want to take your time, but a very small committee of us, handful, created the Jefferson County Open Space Program in Colorado 50 years ago. That's still going strong. It was 0.5% sales tax. It's bringing in, well, I don't know, 15 million or so a year. Now, at one point, and I was telling Gary this, the county commissioners in Jefferson County saw this money in the bank and said, oh, we need money for a new jail. And they had to take it to the voters, and the voter says, are you kidding? We love open space. Anyway, so yeah, it's I'm glad to be on the committee, or I'm glad to be proposed to be on the committee. Thank you.
And so
Right.
Beth, have you applied?
Do I have to apply?
Yeah, there is an application process because we have to make sure you don't have any conflicts of interest and that you're financially going to benefit from being on this committee. It's a very simple form, but there is a form on the town website.
I think she has it. Greg, I think she has it. I emailed it to her this afternoon.
All right.
We only wish it were up to us.
Thanks.
Bev, this is Terry. I just wanted to welcome you tonight. Thank you for listening in. Thank you for introducing or reintroducing yourself. We greatly appreciate your interest, and we also appreciate your willingness to put yourself forward and participate in the application process. So thank you, Bev. Before we move on, I also see a hand raised from Rita. Rita, would you?
Yes, I just want to say, Bev, if you're having any problems with your application, I will help you. I will help you fill it out. This group would really benefit just from her history, her kindness. You know, everyone here is great, but she would be a good match for your group. And she's just, you know, the community loves her, and you know, it might help you get more things done by having her as part of your group. Thank you.
Rita, thank you. Any other comments on this topic? That was a lovely way to potentially wrap up this meeting. Thank you, Gary, for the recommendation, for the encouragement and the introduction. And Bev, thank you again for coming to visit with us. We look forward to your application. Any other comments tonight? I want to say thank you to everybody. Welcome to the new year. Craig, thank you for participating actively. We really appreciate your commitment and care and your efforts on the committee and on the community's behalf. So thank you for that as well. And thank you to my fellow committee members as well. I really appreciate your patience and your partnership as we navigate these familiar and unfamiliar topics and processes. So thank you, and thank you for the community for participating and listening in. I really appreciate that. We all really appreciate that. And with that, maybe I could have a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Gary and Tician second. And Christy, I think, even waved. Maybe that was a all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, and good night. Much appreciated.